Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
In today's educational environment, students and teachers are juggling a mix of face-to-face, online and blended learning courses. Canvas by Instructure helps teachers navigate these diverse learning experiences with a user-friendly virtual learning environment that offers flexible access to courses and a consistent learning experience, all while streamlining everyday teaching processes. The world's best schools and universities are using Canvas to create dynamic courses, collaborate seamlessly, and access actionable data that drives student success.
Are you looking for lesson planning materials to kickstart the new term? We've got you covered. The Day is a global online resource that turns the news into lessons. We're offering listeners a free resource on Andrew Tate that you can find on thedaynews.co/Tate. Inspire personal development and critical thinking for your students by downloading the Tate Debate today and feel more confident addressing sensitive topics with your class. Visit thedaynews.co/Tate to find out more.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Teachers Talk Radio. It's me again for the late show, where this evening I'm going to be talking all things behaviour with some classroom management 101s. I've got a series of, well, let's say between 10 and 15 scenarios / questions, which range from things that I guess you could call them facts. They're like common challenges, questions, situations, scenarios that teachers find themselves in. And I'm going to discuss with 3 other teachers this evening what they would do in the situation were they presented with these things. Now, granted, this might not be phase specific. Some of them are, I guess, more geared towards secondary level, I guess, but a lot of them are just common across all phases and levels. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be really interesting to discuss what my guests would do. And of course, we're all just teachers. Not one of us would sort of sit here and say we are an expert. We're all still teaching. I've got 3 panelists plus myself. All 4 of us are still in the classroom at various phases, levels, experience levels, and all the rest of it. So it's going to be really interesting to talk to 3 teachers who are very much on the front line still about these different scenarios. Now, we know if you check out any survey that exists at the moment, whether it be a union-based questionnaire or survey, whether it be something from a survey group or survey company, whether it be from government, you will find that most teachers claim that behaviour has got worse in the last couple of years since the pandemic. So I guess one of the responses to that for me is to explore the things that are within our control to change or to try and adapt to. I mean, some things are going to be outside the teacher's control and outside of the school's control, but there's always going to be certain factors that teachers can control or at least make a difference to. So as I say, I've got 10 to 15 different common scenarios faced by teachers in different settings that we're going to run through. And of course, during this, if you want to get involved yourself, in the bottom right-hand side, there's a little speech bubble, a little sort of speech icon where you can leave your own questions or comments or anything you want us to discuss tonight, any particular things that you think, oh, do you know what, they missed that? That'd be a really good discussion point. Hit the little speech icon in the bottom right-hand side, and you can get involved by just tweeting us and sending us in a question or whatever. Just before we get started, it's probably a good time for me to mention that this show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, and we've actually pinned to the top of the space a tweet from us referencing the discount that John Catt are providing to any Teachers Talk Radio listener who uses the code JCTTR2324 on checkout for any book at johncattbookshop.com. You get 20% off your order. So it's well worth checking out if you've got anything that you're thinking, oh, do you know what? I was meaning to get that book ages ago, but I might get it now. You can get 20% off by using JCTTR2324 at johncattbookshop.com. And that code is in the tweet that I've pinned, the post that I've pinned into the space, or Nathan has pinned into the space, I should say. Let me now introduce some of my guests this evening. We'll just check they can hear us, and we'll check that we're ready to go. So, Andy, can you unmute yourself? There we go.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, good evening. How are you today?
Yeah, you're lucky. It's half term. You're lucky to find me sober, to be honest. So.
Well, you know what? Some of what we're discussing, maybe that's not a bad thing. I'm joking. We always have to be sober with these conversations because it's going to be challenging. We've also, so I'll come back to you in a minute, Andy, so you can introduce yourself. I'll just check we've got Mrs. Gilmore with us as well.
Hi there. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. It's the end of our half term up here, so yeah.
Excellent.
First day back. Yeah.
I don't know your first name, so I'm going to ask you, Gillian. Right. Well, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself first, Gillian, and then I'll come to Andy. So tell everybody what you do and what you're doing, and a little bit on your journey to this point.
Okay, so I'm a maths teacher, and I've been teaching maths since 2005. I've taught in Scotland and I've taught abroad. I taught in Nairobi, Mexico City, and Kuwait.
Wow.
So I've taught under the GCSE, A-level and international baccalaureate as well. So I'm familiar with the English qualification system. And right now I'm a temporary teacher of maths, and I've got a contract until June because at the moment, I don't know if it's the same down in England, but trying to find a permanent contract is quite difficult. So that's where I'm at just now at my stage in my journey. So I'm a classroom teacher, teaching maths at the minute.
Okay, and Andy, can you introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, I don't really know why I'm here, to be honest. I don't think I'm any more of an expert.
Would you stop with that now, please?
Yeah, I don't think I'm any more of an expert than anyone else. But I am a secondary maths teacher have been for 20 plus years. I'm currently a joint head of department. I've taught in state schools, private schools, and yeah, I've taught A-level GCSE. I've done a little bit down in Key Stage 2 as well, and still do a little bit in Key Stage 2 as well.
Wow. Well, listen, I think just in experience terms, you've both got, a real range of experiences there, which are going to help the discussion. I'm also going to have Derek join us as well, hopefully in a bit. I have invited him, so hopefully he can connect in. But we're going to have sort of a broad range in discussion. We're going to go through some of these sort of scenarios. Some of them are pretty common. So I thought we'd start with like some of the most common ones. So the first one that I've written down here, some of them have actually come in from listeners. About 60% I've come up with, and about 40% have come in from other people. So the first one is a large number of students are continuing to talk while you're talking. Now, I honestly think this is like one of the most common things that can happen to any teacher, actually, in certain contexts. So I wondered, maybe I'll start with you, Andy, whether you had any thoughts or any immediate sort of reaction to that problem or challenge that a large number of students are continuing to talk while you're talking.
Yeah, it's a tough one because you're under pressure to get a certain amount of content covered.
Mm-hmm.
You can fire out the old it's your time you're wasting, if you like, but people they won't necessarily care about that. When I taught at certain schools, I've always had classes of a certain type where this was an issue. Whereas this was an issue. So it all boils down to relationships, and I'll show you a bit of respect if oh no, not quite. It's all about respect for each other. So if the kids respect you and you respect the kids, then it makes it a bit easier. But that takes a while to set up. So that's not the most helpful comment from me. But yeah, it's a tricky one. Everyone says to wait, but eventually you're going to have to start. And actually, there will be people who don't care how long you wait. They'll just be, and then the bell will go, and they'll get up and leave. Go, cheers, see you later.
Yeah, I mean, would you suggest perhaps one thing that I've read and that I've done before myself is to sort of address individuals with it. If there's a group, sort of go through individuals and address each individual in turn.
I think. Not making a big thing of it, and going and having a quiet word is probably more productive than maybe sort of standing there and shouting at the front. I'm trying to speak here. Sort of, do you mind type thing. Trying to be polite with it. Actually, it's showing a bit of respect. I'm on the committee of a cricket club, and we have groups of kids coming along and smoking things they shouldn't be smoking on our pavilion steps and stuff. And actually, if you talk to them like they're human beings, they tend to actually go, okay, fair enough. I'll toe the line then. So a little bit of respect actually is the most important thing, I think.
Well, I think your tone and approach is, for me, important, isn't it? Because you need to start from a position of, like you say, of sort of respect and not necessarily deference. That's a completely different thing, but of respect and just, talking to them as people and individuals and everything. Now, I think most teachers will do that from a matter of course. But sometimes it is worth sort of checking yourself.
It's slightly a case of confidence as well. When I was early in my career, I was terrible at this, if I'm honest, and I raised my voice too often. Not in anger, but just like just to be heard, really.
Well, it can be frustration. Yeah. It can be frustration, can't it? You said it yourself. You've got time pressure. You've got a lot of different things that you feel that you have to do, you have to achieve, particularly near the start of lessons. And if you don't sort of conquer that challenge of loads of people talking while you're talking, then then it's a really tough situation to be in. And you can understand whatever people do to try to deal with that situation, particularly in a mainstream classroom where you might have 35 students in front of you.
But again, that's where it boils down to relationships. So, I mean, it's even more embarrassing if you're being observed, but one would hope you wouldn't be observed with that particular class until you've had time to build up a relationship.
Yeah, exactly. I'll bring Gillian in. Gillian, do you want to have your 2 pennies on this one?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with a lot of what Andy says. The building the relationships is key, and it's about showing respect and getting the respect back. You model the behaviour you want to see. So if you're shouting, they might respond with shouting because they're mimicking your behaviour. If you've got a class that are quite chatty and you know they're chatty, try and preempt that. So I think routines and consistency. So I meet and greet the kids at the door. I've got a starter ready for them. It might be something that's on the Promethean board. It might be an activity for them to start as they come in the room individually. And by the time they've all come in sort of individually in their dribs and drabs, they're engaged in something at the beginning of the lesson. I then have structure to my lesson. So things like once my starter's finished, I go into the main body of the lesson. It might be me talking, just explaining something for a bit, and then it leads into the activities that I've got ready for them. Then you've got your plenary and your exit tickets and things like that. So it's about having that routine, that structure, and that can help with chatty classes. It also depends what they're talking about, because I mean, if they're talking about the work and they're engaged, sometimes you just got to go with it and go off piece.
I mean, more for me. Yeah, I mean that first. Yeah, I mean that first one was more about a large number of students are continuing to talk while you're talking, rather than a large number of students are continuing to talk. I think there's a difference between those two things, like you say. And, you know, there's some contexts and some situations where I've been in where you could sort of say, right, come on, settle down now, people, and it'll happen.
Yeah.
You know, sort of reminder, and it'll happen. And of course, that'll also depend on how established. I think Andy touched on this.
Yeah.
It's like how long you've got to establish yourself and your routines and your patterns and your way. You know, before you can sort of just, I don't know how to describe it, but, you know, I guess like be the teacher you want to be, sort of thing, you know. But I also think like shouting is a no-no. But, you know, again, sometimes you can use your voice very effectively. You can quieten down your voice. You can turn the tone up a little bit. You can, you know, have an assertive tone without shouting. And yeah, and that can work well.
Yeah, I agree. It's about modelling those behaviours that you wish to see in the class. So, as I say, if you're shouting and throwing your toys out the pram, so to speak, then they're not going to respond well to that. And what I usually do is, if I've got a really noisy class, I actually start speaking quieter and quieter and quieter, and they start to listen. But it doesn't always work. And as Andy says, sometimes those kids will come in, they'll just talk over you, and they'll just go. And I think it's a case of staying calm and building those relationships. And once you build the relationships, the attention from the pupils will follow, but it takes time.
Yeah, it takes time, absolutely. And I think, you know, what do you two think about this idea of sort of conflict in the early stages with a group where this sort of thing might be happening, where a large number of students are continuing to talk while you're talking? Do you sort of challenge them? Do you, you know, what do you do? You know, what you've said, maybe talk to them on an individual level. You know, I've said maybe to sort of address, you know, maybe 2 or 3 students. I find that once you start addressing them in a very calm way, 1 or 2 or 3 students, then the others sort of clock on.
Yeah.
But some people would say, no, just do nothing, just stare, just do the teacher stare, just wait for quiet. As Andy said, though, sometimes that won't happen.
Yeah.
Or you're in a situation where you wait for quiet, and then you eventually get quiet, and then someone does something just as you're about to talk, and you're back again. Now, some people would say spend 20 minutes on that, and I think fair enough. You know, we have to do whatever works for us. The other option, of course, is to address maybe with 2 or 3 in a sort of assertive, non-aggressive, business-like way, and just sort of address as quick as you can. John, I want you to stop talking now. Thank you. Lisa, I want you to stop talking now. Thank you. And do that sort of semi-quickly and assertively. Instruction, please, thank you, whatever the script there is. And then hopefully others will look at that and go, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to start responding. And then maybe you might whittle it down to 1 who, you know, is still sort of refusing to sort of buy into what you want. And then maybe you've got different options, haven't you? You know, what to do then. You know? I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud here.
To be honest, most kids know what they're doing. Will know what they're doing is not right, and it's getting them to show you and their classmates a bit of respect. It's not just and once they realise that they're not just affecting the teacher, because affecting the teacher actually is kind of amusing. When I was at school, that was amusing, making the teacher get annoyed, actually. And I wasn't the best student in the world. Many will be absolutely surprised to hear. So annoying teachers. But if you're annoying your mates by holding up the lesson, actually that's quite powerful. So you're sort of, Johnny, please, do you mind stopping, because we need to get on, that sort of thing. But it's pleases and thank yous help as well. Politeness is key. If it comes across as rude, you got no chance.
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot there on that one. We've got Daisy here. Daisy, I don't know whether you've heard the end of that one, but it was a large number of students are continuing to talk while you're talking.
Yeah, I caught the end of it.
I mean, we've pretty much covered that. I guess like the sort of situation where you haven't been it, where everything we've just done hasn't worked. What do you do then?
Yeah, so I think obviously this majorly depends on the school and like the support network that you've got in regards to like behavior. But I'm pretty ruthless, like with my classroom management. Like,
yeah,
if I've had to ask twice, and to be honest, I'll ask the first time, like, all right, that's enough, thank you. Like, not talking when I'm talking. And then the second time, it's okay. Now, we're really not talking when I'm talking. If I have to ask you again, there's going to be consequences, blah, blah, blah. Third time, out. Send them out. And the thing is, I will sort of echo, like, what Andy said. Like, I would frame it like that. I'd be like, you need to leave because you're disrupting the lesson and no one else in here is learning. So you need to go wait outside. Like, frame it in a way of like, you're not bothering me. You're stopping them from learning.
There's also the opportunity, perhaps after a set of prompts that could be that, like I said, that sort of assertive. I want you to stop talking now, please. They continue to do it. Okay, I'll go back again. And it may be after that sort of assertive phase, you then flip into sanctions, which is what you've just described, whatever the school policy is, that you have available to you. And it may be that at the end of that sanction process, after towards the end of, that might be the time to present the choice of, well, you can either do A or B, and the result of B is this, and the result of A is this. That's an option.
I'm a really big fan of like, it's like rule 101 is like, you mustn't back a student into a corner. So when I send students out, it's to have that private conversation of like, what is going on? Like, why are we consistently doing that? Like, do you not understand? Do you need more help? Like, what's going on? Like, and I always frame it in a way of like, because I know you're not just choosing to talk over me. Like, I know you wouldn't do that. So what is it? Like, just framing it. And then, like you say, if you get to the A and B, I just think the most important part with that is, if you go in there and you carry on talking, I'm going to do this, this, and this. If you go in and carry on working, job done, no problem. Like, we're moving on. Like, it's giving them both options and saying, this is what happens next is entirely up to you. And this is, but this is what we'll do. And I think that, when I talk to ECTs about that, it's just super important, I think, at that stage, that whatever you say is going to happen, like, you must not bluff.
Yeah.
Like, what you say is going to, if you carry on, I'm going to contact home, have got to contact home. Even if at the time, even if looking back, you're a bit like, probably, probably jump the gun a little bit there. It doesn't matter. Once you've said that to them, that has to come next. You have to follow through. Like, because, then you're just reinforcing the fact you chose that outcome. There's the outcome. Like, but yeah, like you say, I would give a choice. I would say, listen, you can either carry on talking and disrupting the lesson, and this is going to happen, or you can take part. I'm happy to come and give you a bit more help. We can do this and do that, and everything's golden. Carry on with lesson, sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, like, I mean, it's that sort of assertive model with and then you want to stay in that assertive zone. This is my opinion. You want to stay in that assertive zone for as long as possible before flipping into the sanctions. You want to try and stay there, but obviously, if you can't, you then have to flip at some point into that, and then it's how you present those, and it's how you, again, between the sanctions, sort of flipping back into those assertive conversations, giving that time for them to actually make a change in the behavior, or choose to, rather than going, right, that's first warning, right, that's second warning, right, that's third warning, right.
Yeah, and you must avoid the setting them up to fail, because if they're, if sometimes I think that, like, we've all done it. Like, oh my, like, I used to be the worst for getting the giggles, and I still do now. If something makes me laugh, and if it's really got me, then it takes me ages to sort of stop. And especially if I keep seeing the thing that's made me laugh or something like that, you need to give them the opportunity to sort of step out of it, which is why I do like sending them out. I go out and talk to them super calm, super like, what is going on? And then I always say, I'm going to go back in, you take a minute, and then what happens. Like, we either crack on, or we'll have to have another conversation. And I think, and just saying to them, like, give it a minute, is, again, you're allowing them to take control, and you're allowing them to be in control of what happens next. Because sometimes if you are, like you say, 1-1 and 2-1 and 3-1 and out, then it's just very kind of, it's almost like they're on the roller coaster. You have backed them into a corner, and they also have to save face. And especially in senior schools, teenagers will always save face. Like, you can't embarrass them. Like, if you try and embarrass them, they will push back. So by, again, having that conversation in private and then giving them a minute, you potentially offer them an out, so they don't have to carry on with that sort of confrontation with you, because you've offered them a way out without losing face.
Catherine's made some really good points. Catherine's tweeted in, friend of the show, or friend of TTR, says, can you not add up the minutes lost and add them to the detention? Probably. She also says humour can be helpful. Absolutely, definitely.
My absolute favourite is if it's after break or lunch, I always start with what did you have for break? Have you had a lot of sugar today? Like, bouncy, like, just kind of really jovial, really kind of friendly. I'm an avid hater of detention, so I won't.
Well, let's move on, because I've got lots to get through. So, Gillian, I want to come to you next on this one. So this one is at the start of lessons. Students are entering very noisy and all over the place. You don't teach in your own classroom, so you can't set up prior to that lesson starting, and you can't really line up the students easily. What would you suggest on this one?
Again, it depends on the school. In our school, we've got our own laptops, and there's docking stations in each classroom. So even if I don't teach in one classroom, I can have everything set up on my computer.
Yeah.
For the lesson. So it's a case of, I go in, I click my computer on the docking station, I'm good to go. So there is still a quick start. As they come in, if I know I'm using this classroom, I've got a seating plan. I think seating plans are key.
Can be more challenging if you change rooms. I mean, you can still have the seating plan, but it can be challenging to manage it if you're in 4 or 5 different classrooms, I guess. People move chairs around, tables around, etc.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But at the same time, if it's a classroom that's not my own, I tend not to move the tables. I would just go with whatever that teacher of that classroom has set up they have. Right. But I do think that's important to have that kind of structure again. The meet and greet part, so as they're coming in, okay, you can't necessarily line them up, but you can, chat to them as they're coming in, and, if they've got an energy can, put that away, put your phone away, and just that kind of discreet kind of mention it to them as they come in the door. As they're coming in, right, you come into class, make sure you get your jotter out, starters on the board, start the starter. That always works for me, having the starter on the board, if it's not my own room, and just having something for them just to get them engaged to begin with. If you don't know how to do the starter, copy the question down just now, because some will be like, I don't know what I'm doing right. Well, write the question down just now. I'll go over it in a minute or two with you, but let's just get in, get started, get the jackets off, get the phones away, get the energy drinks away if it's after break or whatever, and just get all those little issues ironed out. If they need a pencil, just give them a pencil. I always just make sure I've got stuff like that. I don't have arguments about the little things. I think it's you pick your battles with them.
Yeah.
There are kids, I've worked in some really challenging schools with kids that, they just don't have a pencil. They can't afford things like that. So it's just, you just make sure you've got that. So, and again, it's about having a routine as best as you can. And it is difficult when it's not your own classroom and you come in and, maybe the teacher before you's run on and, the kids are bouncing off the walls or whatever. It is difficult, but stay calm, and just go with it as best as you can. So you can't control everything, and you can't control the behaviour of others. So if the class are coming in and they're not settling, you just have to stay calm, stick to your routine, stick to your consistency, keep your expectations consistent with them as well, and take it from there.
Mm-hmm. Andy, I don't know whether you've got anything to add on this one, which is this one about, just for anyone joining us who's just joined us, we're going through a list of scenarios that are common in schools when it comes to student behaviour, and talking about how we might try and manage those scenarios. So this one is at the start of lessons, students are entering very noisy and all over the place. You don't teach in that classroom. And so you can't really line up the students easily. And Gillian's given some great sort of suggestions there. Andy, I don't know whether you've got anything to add to that.
Not really, but I will say that I think a personalised welcome greeting is an underrated thing. Because it makes every student feel valued within the class. But ultimately, it all boils down to routines. If you get into good routines, so Gillian's got her starters and stuff. I do title, date, and all that sort of stuff, and we're ready to learn within a minute. I do the register by eye, so we're not faffing about whilst I call out however many names. We're ready to get on with doing some maths. So that it boils down to routines. It boils down to personalised greetings, which comes down to relationships again. It's amazing how much of teaching and successful teaching, whether I do that or not, is possibly a moot point. Please don't talk to any of my students to confirm or deny that. But it does boil down to relationships and valuing everyone's input into a lesson.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think one of the common strands there from what yourself and Gillian have both said is, give them something to do, whatever that is, it might not be perfect, but having, you can use a task, particularly at the very start of the lesson, as a vehicle to sort of drive you and the class forward. Give them that focus, give them something to do. It can be very difficult if you enter in a classroom as a teacher that has to move rooms. You're just in there, nothing set up the way you want it. You're faffing around. You've got to sort of triple task. I was going to say multitask, like definitely multitask, probably about 3 or 4 things going on all at once. And it's very, very difficult. It can be very, very difficult. I've been in that situation.
This is where you rely on colleagues actually not messing the classroom up. And not leaving it a tip, etc., etc. I'm a big believer in the staff body being a very collegiate unit and moving in the same direction. I'm not sure everyone else is the same, but I think they think possibly they're the same. But if you leave a classroom really untidy or have moved the desks and haven't moved them back, that can destroy a lesson that follows you.
Katrina, I can't connect you. I know you're an 18 plus award-winning adult star, but I know you've requested to speak, but I just worry about the sort of content. And we're talking about classroom management here in school. So thank you anyway for listening, Katrina. Really appreciate it. Daisy, I don't know whether you've got anything on this.
Yeah, so in terms of like a really boisterous class coming in, I think sort of piggybacking on the relationships thing, like if you've got a couple of key kids who are potentially the more boisterous of the group or are the ones likely to sort of struggle settling in, like I like to get them on side, give them something to do, like, do me a favor, will you hand these out, or while I just do the register, can you just do this, can you just do that? Especially if you're moving classrooms and stuff, get them up to be like, oh guys, I'm rushing around, grab this box, will you? Will you move that for me? Like get them on side a little bit, get them helping. And then I think the other thing is, like you say, routines, but also carrying. This is so much easier said than done, but carrying expectations. So regardless of how frazzled you are, or regardless of what room you're in, like if they know that they are expected, that you're not going to tolerate sort of that really mad silliness at the start, or if they know that you are, like for me, for example, like I'm known for being particularly sort of I suppose you'd say strict when it comes to getting started, then making sure that that's consistent across the classrooms that you're teaching, and try not to end up in a pattern where you're like, oh, okay, well, lesson 5 on a Thursday, she's a right pushover because she's all stressed. Like try not to create that like feeling, because students are unbelievably good at pattern recognition, so that they will pick up within a couple of weeks that's your week lesson, and that's the one that they don't have to really do anything. And
or they think they don't like you, or they think you don't like them. If you start to get into that situation where they're just seeing the worst of you, every lesson. Now some of that might be out of your control as a teacher. So some of it might genuinely be, you just mentioned it, when their lesson is, where their lesson is, where they're coming from,
what they've got,
what you're having to teach them. Because if you're a non-specialist, for example, you might not be as inspired as you are when you're teaching in your specialism. There's a lot of different factors there to throw in. Of course, there's millions, but ultimately you've got to try and you've got to try and almost like not get into that situation where they're going, he hates us, we hate him, and this is the way it is, and that's the way it's going to be. Because once that happens, it's possible to get out of it, but it's going to be a long haul.
Yeah, and I think that's where like carrying this expectation with you, like regardless of what lesson it is and stuff. And I think if there's any like new teachers, like my number one advice really would be those lessons where you're at your most stressed, you're most tired, like, or whatever, they're the ones that you need to foresee and plan the most for. You know, it's the one where you need to literally plan it almost like from a behavioral perspective as well as a curriculum perspective. Like okay, what jobs can I get them to do in them first few minutes? Right, what, you know, how are we going to make sure there's not the 30-minute lull here, because it's lesson 5, it's right after lunch, there's always a 30-minute lull about the middle of the lesson when lunch is settled, a bit heavy, they're a bit tired, like what am I going to do at this bit? Like that's the one where you need your routine to be stronger than ever. And that's a big ask, like, because it's exhausting. But yeah, I definitely would say if you've got that class or you're in that room or whatever, that's the one that you need to target in your planning and make sure that it's bulletproof in terms of keeping them occupied, keeping them on side, and then that will calm you down and your behaviour will be better, then your teaching will be better, I guess.
Yeah. Andy, I'll come to you on this next one first. One particular student keeps shouting out answers or points during the lesson consistently over a series of lessons. Not necessarily like shouting out bad things, but just continually shouting out over you and other students. But not necessarily really bad things, just shouting out. What do you sort of do with that one?
I don't. They're doing it for the right reasons. They want to show that they've listened to you. They want to show that they've learned what you're trying to teach them.
Yeah.
So actually, you can't really have a dig at them. What I do, because this happens, I find quite a lot actually. I say, look, I know you know how to do it. Can we give someone else a try? Yeah. You know, and actually, what I try and do, but I'm a bit bad at remembering sometimes. I said, I don't want hands up. And I don't want people shouting out. I can't have you shouting out. I'm going to choose people. Now, they get a free pass if they genuinely don't know, but you can't free pass every time. Or they can get a phone a friend or anything like that. But the kids, again, they know right and wrong. They know when they're doing, you know, they know when they're shouting out, they realise eventually, if you point it out to them nicely, they will know that actually, yeah, I really ought to give somebody else a chance, because whilst, you know, I'm doing really well here, other people might want to prove that they're doing really well. And actually, it's a collegiate thing within the class, within the student body, I think.
No, really, really good. Gillian, I don't know whether you've got anything to add on that one.
I agree with what Andy said. Usually I kind of put it as, thank you for your answers. You've answered really well. Let's give someone else in the class a chance to answer. I'm going to choose some people to answer some of the questions. Because, you know, I try and kind of get the kid on side and give it, we don't want everybody just depending on you to answer the questions. Let's see if anybody else knows the answers just now. But you always say thank you to the people for answering and letting them know that their contribution's valued. If they continuously shout out, usually, I don't know if you'd like this idea, but on our Promethean board, I don't know if you've got Promethean boards where you are, but like interactive whiteboard, you can bring up a spinner and put the kids' names on it and use that.
I mean, that's sort of.
You may or may not like that idea, but it might work if you've got a few shouter-outers.
Well, Derek's actually messaged in. He said, I've got rid of hands up and have mostly moved to cold calling or variations of it, which is essentially what you're sort of describing.
Yeah.
I guess, I mean, I personally, I like that idea. If you can organize it and you feel comfortable with it, obviously you'd have to have reasonable adjustments. If you pick somebody who, for whatever reason, you just knew they didn't want to sort of talk in front of everybody else, that's fine. But I do like that idea fundamentally. Daisy, what do you think of that idea from Gillian, the sort of cold calling approach, or like a random name generator and stuff like that?
Yeah, I'm a big advocate for it. I think that the hands up idea is like, it's nice and stuff, but and it works for some classes, but if you have got that kid who just keeps shouting it out and just keeps answering, not only is it annoying for the teacher and stuff, but you tend to find it builds quite a lot of resentment in the room as well. Like, students start getting annoyed. You start getting, you might get that one kid who's like, oh, shut up, or you might start seeing people almost not even attempting to answer because they know that kid's going to shout it out. If that's happening, then yeah, I think cold calling is perfectly fine, like you say, as long as you make reasonable adjustments and as long as you're kind of aware of who you're asking. But to be honest, the hands up thing, like, it causes as many problems as it solves. Like, so I think cold calling is a good shout for most instances, to be honest, unless you've got a really sort of confident and comfortable class. I think cold calling is probably better.
Andy?
Cold calling is fine, absolutely fine, as long as when a kid genuinely doesn't know, and actually this becomes easier, I think, as you get to know the class.
Yeah.
And again, boils down to relationships. What was I going to say? So you will know, you will pick your certain questions for certain kids sometimes, and that's because you don't want to dent anyone's confidence. So
you don't want to humiliate anybody.
Absolutely.
So that's. And once you know them, you're absolutely
that's where
right.
the free pass thing comes in. So if they say, "Oh no, I can't," I'd rather not answer that one. That's fine, and don't make a thing of it. Move on. But if they keep doing it, then you probably need to have a quiet word and just say, "Look, why don't you? I know you know this stuff. That's kind of why I'm asking you these questions." And it's trying to build their confidence up and say, "Look, I do believe in you, even if you don't believe in yourself."
Yeah, that's fantastic. And for me, it's sort of, again, it's like that cute sort of common sense to go, right, okay, I've done my name generator, or I've done my cold calling, but I know what I need to do with this student. I need to build their confidence. I need to give them a start of a 10. I need to give them something where I can go, that is brilliant, well done. And then come back to them maybe later with something a bit more challenging,
I use phone a friend as well, where I say, like, do you want to phone a friend? And then they will pick somebody, and I say, like, just help them get started. Like, don't give them the full answer, but just help them get started, trying to, again, build a bit of like camaraderie in the class. Because I think that really helps in the fight against poor attitudes or poor behavior, is building like a team ethos within the class. So like bouncing the question, say, okay, phone a friend. Like you say, that kind of supportive, but not necessarily letting them get out of it.
Yeah. Makes sense. Well, we'll move on because we've still got quite a few to get through here. So the next one that I've sort of put into this pack is a few students keep going through all the available warnings in your lessons. They're sent out according to the policy for the rest of the lesson. So they might be put into isolation, they may be taken to another classroom, whatever. They don't reappear within that given lesson, but then they return in the lesson after that and they repeat those behaviors and you repeat the processes. What do you do in this situation? I'll start on this one with Gillian.
In today's educational environment, students and teachers are juggling a mix of face-to-face, online and blended learning courses. Canvas by Instructure helps teachers navigate these diverse learning experiences with a user-friendly virtual learning environment that offers flexible access to courses and a consistent learning experience, all while streamlining everyday teaching processes. The world's best schools and universities are using Canvas to create dynamic courses, collaborate seamlessly, and access actionable data that drives student success.
Are you looking for lesson planning materials to kickstart the new term? We've got you covered. The Day is a global online resource that turns the news into lessons. We're offering listeners a free resource on Andrew Tate that you can find on thedaynews.co/Tate. Inspire personal development and critical thinking for your students by downloading the Tate Debate today and feel more confident addressing sensitive topics with your class. Visit thedaynews.co/Tate to find out more.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncatbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
I don't always think isolation works, and that might be a controversial opinion to have. I think it's needed sometimes if you've got extreme behaviour, extremely challenging behaviour in your classroom. If there's a health and safety issue or someone's been really aggressive, they need to go and dysregulate somewhere because they can't regulate where they are. That's fair enough. But if you start isolating a pupil, you're not building that relationship with them.
No, but that wasn't what I was
Yeah,
actually
I think
asking.
I maybe missed the point.
Yeah, I was asking so the situation is a few students keep going through all the available warnings in your lessons. They're sent out according to the policy, but they return the next lesson or the one after, and they repeat the same behaviours.
Between sending them out and then the next lesson, have you spoken with that pupil?
Well,
because I would say that's maybe what the problem is. It's like, right, okay,
well,
you've
let's
sent them out,
imagine
but
you
then
have.
if
Let's imagine you have.
And they're still repeating the behaviour.
Yeah.
That's a wider issue then. So I suppose you need to know background, circumstances. You need to talk to your principal teacher, head of department about that type of thing and look for strategies to try and keep that pupil in the class and figure out why they're not engaging with you. If you've tried talking to people directly and you're following the school policy and they're repeatedly not, it's a bigger issue. It's more than just what's going on in that class. And you'll probably find that particular group of pupils are probably like that throughout the school. Rather than just in your class. And I think a lot of teachers take behaviour very personally, and a lot of behaviour is not actually your fault, you know. And I've said before, you can't control the behaviour of others. You just have to look at the situation and just, if you're following school policy and they're repeating that behaviour time and time again, it needs to go further.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, let's presume that there isn't, you know, I'm doing a lot of presuming here because we're sort of making up the scenario, but I think it's a scenario that can happen. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's imagine that you know the background, you know that there isn't a in inverted commas big issue behind it. Yeah, I mean, what do you do? You know, like it's like, what do you do next? You know.
So in Scotland, I don't know if you follow this approach where you are as well. We follow a pivotal approach. And it's kind of based in restorative practice to a sense, and it's based on if they're misbehaving in class, you do your meet and greet, you follow scripting, for example, with behaviour, you try and catch them being good in class rather than focus on the negatives. But I suppose what I would do is that's a chat with my principal teacher, and it might be a contact home or something or some sort of consequence to that behaviour. I don't like detentions, but I would probably be more like, usually you find when you contact home, or even just telling them that you're going to contact home is enough. But as I say, if it's repeated behaviour, it can become quite exhausting after a while. And it is something I've experienced in the past. And what I did about it was spoke to because we can't contact home as class teachers where we are. It has to be a principal teacher or a pastoral teacher that contacts home, so we have to defer it further above us for that type of thing.
Okay, I'll bring some other people in now.
Yeah.
So, is Derek actually here? Derek, let's see if Derek's here. Derek, if you want to try unmuting, there you go.
There you are. Yeah,
hello.
hi.
Good evening to you. You okay?
I'm good. I've been here for a while. I've been listening to this. It's been great.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for listening and for coming in and getting involved. Did you hear that last bit? We're talking about this scenario of...
I did. And I think for me, a lot of it builds on some of the stuff that's already been said. And like Gillian, I teach up in Scotland, and this is not something, you know, after 20 odd years of teaching, it's not something that happens to me very often. But for me, when it does happen, I think the key is going to sort out that student. So, for example, if I send a student out of my class, they've been sent out of my class, they go to my PT or they go to the deputy head, whoever is responsible for that. One thing that I can't stand, and I've never been able to stand in education, is those teachers who keep grudges. You know, you were crap in my last lesson. I assume you're going to be like that in this lesson. And I always go and try and make a point of whenever I've had an issue with a student, if they stayed in the class, I'll do it before they leave. If they've had to leave the class, I'll go and find them before the next lesson. And I'll have a little conversation with them. And I'll say, look, this is what happened. It's been dealt with now. As far as I'm concerned, you know, that's it done. When you come into my class at the start of the next lesson, everything's going to be fine. It's a clean slate. It's a fresh start. We don't have to have any issues, because the way I look at it is, you know, I'm a 6 foot tall, rather large, bearded Welshman, and a lot of the kids that I speak to are a lot smaller than me, and they're a lot less mature than me, and they're
like the BFG, big friendly.
Yeah, exactly.
Guy.
Yeah, well, you got the B and the G, right? Not so that friendly very often, that they say, but I think you know, it can be quite intimidating to be told off by an adult. Yeah. Some of these children may never have massively positive relationships with adults outside of school.
No.
Have sometimes what might be a repetition of what's going on in their home life from an adult. So I like to try and sort of restore the relationship and give them a fresh start. But if it continues the next time, then we just have to, you know, refer it and continue to use the school system and hope that the school system works well enough. So with us up here,
it's robust enough.
Yeah. So in the Highlands, it would be, you know, I would then refer it to my PT. It would then go to their guidance teacher, you know, and then further actions and sanctions are put in place. I'm lucky. I work in a school with a very supportive senior leadership, with a senior leadership who won't tolerate abuse and so on, and who will step in very quickly. But I can see that this could be quite a demoralizing thing for teachers, particularly, I would say, you know, beginning teachers, or what are they called these days? ECTs. You know, it can be demoralizing. And absolutely, as Gillian said, we mustn't take it personally. It's very rare, I found in my time as a teacher, that it's ever been personal abuse.
No.
I may have been the target, but it's not. It's very rarely been about me.
No, it's part of. I was going to say it's part of the job. It's you have to have a positive regard, of course you do, and you know, I agree with you. It's very, very. You need to disconnect. You need to be able to see that as part of what you need to do to get from A to B, and you have to have that positive regard in each lesson. Like, I think you used the word clean slate, which is the perfect sort of phraseology, I guess. Daisy, I don't know whether you've got anything to add on this one, but the original one was a student goes through all the available warnings in your lesson. They get sent out on based on the policy each lesson, or in numerous lessons, one after the other. Repeat the behaviours. What do you do?
So for me, you've got two big problems. One, the problem obviously is the fact that behaviour is not changing. So that sanction system needs to be taken back to the drawing board because it's not working. And two, every time they're sent out, every time they're not in the lesson, they're falling further behind. You've now got a learning gap, making it even worse. And for the fact that they're coming into a lesson now, and now they're disrupting because they don't know what they're doing, they don't know what bit you're on. They're missing prior knowledge, because let's be honest, most isolation situations or anything like that, they don't really do very much work. So you've now got that whole palaver to sort of catch up with. If you're in a position where you've got a supportive school, mint, brilliant. If you're not, it's so hard. It's like swimming through treacle. But it's not personal. You have got to protect the education of the other 28 kids in the room, and you have to hold the line. It's so easy to drop your standard, or just to stop fighting, because to just stop holding them to that standard, because it's just causing the same problem every lesson. And I totally understand why we get to that place. If you can't do that, you have to hold the line, because you need to look after the education of the other kids in the room who are being disturbed by the whole situation. Restorative chat's great. Like if you've got the time, and if you've got the ability to do that, and the facilities to do that. If not, then you do your best to make sure that the gaps are closed. You could send work home and things like that. But to be honest, if it's being repeated more than 2 or 3 times, I'd expect parents to be in by that point. I'm a head of department, so I'd be phoning parents, and I'd be talking about next steps in terms of education and missed learning. For the classroom teacher, the person who is on the front line, the only thing you can do really in that situation is keep your standards high. You're the adult, don't drop your expectations because of it, and just make sure that you're prioritizing the learning of those who are trying to learn. Because it can be very easy for one of those students to just derail your teaching. And so you need to make sure that the rest of the class are still learning, and that while you're doing everything you can for the disruptive student, you're not doing it at the cost of the others.
Yeah. Mikey has called in. Mikey, if you want to put your 2 pence into this.
Hiya, Tom. Hiya, everybody.
All right.
I just feel like I've been in situations, especially when I was an early career teacher, where it just went on and on and on, and it was demoralising for both like the children who want to learn and myself. I took it a bit too personally when I first started, and that learner. What I've learned now is that tomorrow I've started in a new school this year. I've been teaching for was it 8-9 years now, and there's been 1 or 2 issues in year 8. Apparently I'm not the only person having problems, but I've got 2 frees tomorrow morning. I'm going to go now, break time, change over, etc. And I need to pick off 1 or 2 characters and have a couple of chats. If again now that doesn't work, I'll get a head of year involved, and we'll have again like a corridor chat. If that doesn't work, it's time for a sit down, and it's time for like parents to get involved. I think if it keeps going, if there's no escalation, I think you do need to like escalate it yourself.
Yeah, I think you have to ask for support. You have to ask for help, and at times maybe you need to demand help. You need to say, listen, I've exhausted everything I can do here. I've tried everything. I'm doing everything I can as a professional.
100%.
What can you do to help me? And if the answer is more of the same, then of course your next question might be, well, that hasn't worked so far. So what are we going to do?
Yeah. So from my experience, last week I had the head in my room for support. This, for 8 years in teaching, I can't get anywhere with a year 8 class. It's the first time this has happened to me. Bit demoralising. Gone around the houses. Head pulled me fair play, like in the corridor. How are you getting on? I said, well, I'm struggling with this, to be honest. And he said, well, I'll be up this afternoon. And he based himself in my room for 1 lesson, and the lesson was absolutely perfect. Fair play. He told me he enjoyed the teaching, and I said, right, what's the next step now? Is when you don't come back. I said, where are we going from here? And he said, right, we'll have a think about that. And it has improved, but like I've tried to take ego. I've asked, can I go and observe them in a setting with another teacher? And that's what my next step. Because we can all.
But you also have to remember, Mikey. In fairness to you, you've just said you started in a new school, right? So that's going to be a factor, isn't it?
100%. Relationships are key.
Yeah, you haven't had time to build that with them and go through those processes with them yet.
And I always say your system is only as good as your newest or your least experienced teacher, or the lady or the gentleman that comes in for a day's supply. And this is where it comes from: active SLT in corridors, people popping in and out of lessons, heads of year popping in and out of lessons. Anything I need to know, sir? Just this general accountability and buzz around the school. And when there's visible leadership, I do feel it works better.
Yeah. Let's move on to another one. Again, I'll start with Gillian on this next one again, and then maybe go to Andy and so on. In fact, do you know what I'll do? Because Derek's only just joined us, hasn't been with us for that long. I'm going to start with Derek. No, Derek's gone. I'll start with Gillian. Gillian, the next one is students seem, and again, I'll put the word seem in capitals there. Students seem bored and passive in a lot of your lessons. Maybe not all, but a lot of your lessons, the students seem bored and passive, and it's starting to frustrate you. And what would your sort of take on that be?
I need to change something. that would be, I would need to change my approach with that particular class. Anytime I've had major issues with lessons in my teaching career, it's been down to, for me, I always think I've not planned that lesson well enough. I've either maybe not spent enough time planning it, or planning that series of lessons, or I'm not meeting the needs of the children the way I should be, because either there's maybe new information's come out and I'm not aware of how to meet that need yet. So I'm talking about ASN, behaviour needs, things like that, and I've not put that into my planning enough. So I think if they're seeming bored and passive, something needs to change. So get them out their seats, get things that are, and so they'll start with, oh, I don't want to get out of my seat, I don't want to move, why are we doing this? But engage them, make your lessons engaging as best as you can. Now, you can't be all singing, all dancing, all day, every day. That's completely impossible and you would be exhausted. But what I tend to do is I pick maybe a few lessons each week that I'm going to have where, like last week, this might not sound magnificent, but not last week because I was off last week, but a couple of weeks ago we did probability, and I got some Skittles, and we used the colours of Skittles to work out probability. Obviously I checked nobody was allergic first and things like that. We did surface area, and I got them building cubes and putting string through it so that they could close it. So just kind of hands-on activities, and just change up how I'm teaching a little bit to try and get them more engaged, and that does help. And again, that helps with the relationship as well, because I'm new in the school that I'm in just now. I've only been in the school that I'm in about a month now, and I'm building those relationships with the pupils, because that's the most important part, because once you've got the relationships, the rest follows a lot easier than if you don't have those relationships. So I'll change it up a bit. Get them moving, take them outside to do their maths for a bit, something like that, and see if that makes a difference.
Thank you for that. I'm going to move on to Derek and see if Derek's back with us, and then move on to Andy after that. Derek, are you there? Hello.
I am. Sorry, I've got my internet's a bit low. Could you just repeat the question?
Yeah,
for me, Tom?
so the little scenario we're talking about now is students seem to be bored and passive in a lot of your lessons. And Gillian has said from her part, she would look at her planning and look at, I think she said, switch things up or change things up in her planning. She would know it was, that she needs to plan better, basically, and that's the key. I wondered what your thoughts on that are.
Yeah, I think I would agree. I think my first thought would be to look at the content, and look at the curriculum and what's on offer. Now, I've done a lot of work this year personally, looking at cognitive load theory and how that applies to the students. And you know when you do some training as a teacher, and then for the next couple of weeks, all you see is that thing. You go on the training, all you can see is that particular one. But I've been noticing that a lot of my courses that I've run for the last couple of years have been quite heavy in terms of cognitive load. So I've changed up how I teach. I'm now a big fan of pre-teaching. So when I start a new unit, I make sure that the first 2 or 3 lessons are sort of front loaded with keywords and that sort of thing, so that they're not coming into the lessons and then hearing stuff for the first time and not understanding what it is, and therefore sort of saying to themselves, well, I don't know what that is. Why am I bothering listening to Mr. Roberts? But it absolutely is, again, it's about making it as engaging as possible. Now, unfortunately, with me teaching in the Northwest Highlands, going outside is probably possible on about 1 or 2 days a year. But I can't help but agree with what Gillian said. So what I'll do is I involve the students in this. Students are always told what it is. So I have a questioning strategy of the week. I use various different questioning strategies, of course, throughout the lesson, but there's always one from my list which is actually quite engaging. And they know at some point during the lesson I'm going to stop, and we're going to have a time of questioning. We're going to have a time of some sort of spotlight assessment type thing, and I'll engage this. So, for example, this week's strategy of the week is call and response. So I'll use my cold calling. I'll ask a student to give me an answer. I'll take that answer, then I'll share it with the class, and they all have to then shout it back.
Yeah.
And we'll 2 or 3 times, because what I find is that for the first couple of times I do it, then the students are going to look naturally embarrassed. But if they get into an expectation that they're going to have to engage in your class, they will engage. If they know that you will see them not engaging, then they're going to start engaging because they don't want to be singled out. And if we go back to what we said about relationships and building the positivity, so the more I do it in the class, the more I'm right. Well done, John. You've done really well there. You answered that fantastic. And they're young people, and they want the praise. Mm-hmm. They want to be incentivized and so on. So exactly what Gillian said. I think it's a very hard thing sometimes as a teacher to look inwards and say, what's my part in this?
Yeah.
The students are bored. That's fine. But we have a role. There's something that's made them bored. Could it be me? And it's very hard as a person to be that sort of inward looking. But I think it's a key skill, and it's one I didn't have for first 7 or 8 years of my teaching career. I couldn't do that. It was never my fault. It was always a personal thing on the students, and it was when I sort of started to be able to look in there and say, okay, what can I do to improve that? And after 20 odd years of teaching, it's still a constant battle to improve, because the students that I'm teaching now, the young people I'm teaching now, they are so different from the young people I taught in the late 90s. And they're so different from the young people I taught 10 years ago. And we have to find ways that we can engage them. If we don't engage them, they'll switch off. If they switch off, they'll stop learning. And if they stop learning, they're going to stop behaving.
Gillian, I think you've got your hand up. You want to come back in on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something to that. If your kids are bored and passive, you're bored as well. So that's what I mean by changing it up a bit, because it's boring for you to sit and watch them doing nothing and being bored. So change it up, make it more engaging, and also just get them moving about. And obviously I teach maths, so I'm always trying to find ways to make maths engaging for pupils, because it's not everybody's favourite subject, is it? Let's be honest. And I'm always trying to find ways to apply it to real life and make it useful and get them engaged and interactive about it. And that's things like maybe making an online escape room in OneNote, or doing a treasure hunt in class, or if you've got a big class, that's what I mean by taking them outside if you can, and just getting them moving about but still learning, just maybe in a more of an active way, or just having tasks and activities. In the particular class I'm thinking about right now, they're a class who weren't the most engaged when I took them over a few weeks ago, and they've turned around to say, we really like your lessons because you've always got us doing something, and that's a huge compliment. And also, when the kids see that you're making the effort for them, that gets them more engaged as well, because this teacher's actually making an effort for us.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that.
They appreciate that.
We've got a few more I want to get through. I'm going to go to Andy for this next one to start with, but before I do, it's a good time for me to remind you that this show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Education. So if you're listening to this and think, oh, do you know what? I fancy swatting up on some PD on behaviour, then you can check out johncattbookshop.com, and you can get 20% off any book at johncattbookshop.com by using the code JCTTR2324. That's JCTTR2324. If you use that code, which we've also pinned to the top of this space, then you get 20% off any book at johncattbookshop.com on the full range of titles that they have. And I know they have a behaviour section on there. So well worth checking that out if you've been thinking, do you know what, I'm going to get a book for ages and just haven't got around to it. Take advantage of the 20% off and check it out. So the next one, Andy, that I wanted to ask you about was simple. I've used the term simple here, but let's just say instructions seem to be taking a huge amount of time to enact. So you're giving an instruction to the whole class, and it just feels like every single time it's taking so long to get from A to B. What's your sort of reading on that?
Well, give me the easy ones, Tom. Cheers. It's a tough one, really. It's it's right. I'm the worst of this because I will go on and on about nothing. Actually, no. I will go on about Depeche Mode. Actually, I can bore anyone you like about Depeche Mode, and I do it to my class all the time. I will go off piece quite a lot, so I'm my own worst enemy at this one. So how do I tackle that? I need to shut myself up. And actually, what's quite good, I have a good enough relationship with most of my classes where they will just say, "Sir, you're honestly, you're talking too much. Can we just get on now, please?" And so, actually, it's building that. They will know that if I've given a simple instruction, my classes know when they mess it up. I will say to them, look, this is perfectly simple, like 1 or 2 steps, very simple. I'm going to say it once more and once only. And if you don't know, I'd suggest you ask somebody else to explain to you, because I'm obviously doing it in a language that is not contacting with you, not chiming with you, as it were. So that's a tricky one. I was going to come in on the last one, changing it up, absolutely spot on. I teach maths as well. I use Tarsiers, bingos, treasure hunts, the works. And actually, whilst routines are great, the routine of being busy all the time is a good thing. All right, how you're kept busy can change. So therefore, I'm complete. I really like change up. Let's have a go at this. See what it's like together. That's just a sort of suck it and see type job. With this new thing that I've discovered, I do lots of math jokes as well. So if the kids are starting, I say math jokes, people will be staring at their phones blankly at this point. But we sometimes, if it's drifting at home, we'll have a little 30 seconds to a minute. Has anyone got a good joke I can put in a math sheet? And actually they'll put their hand, and then they'll start engaging, and then we can get back to the work. It's great, actually. So little change ups, going off piece, I would say. And I can't even remember what you asked me about first.
Well, what about? I was going to say, basically, we were talking about. I know Derek's got his hand up, so I'll go to Derek.
Derek's a wise man. I'll go to Derek.
Let's ask Derek. Derek, instruction seems to be taking a huge amount of time for students to enact or do. What's your solution?
This was a major issue for me up until, I don't know, 2 years ago, maybe. And then I came across MOP. I don't know if you know MOP, the means of participation.
No, I've not heard of that one, actually.
So what basically, it's another way is looking at it is I've seen it referred to as landing lights. So I'm not a pilot, so please don't take this as advice on how to land a plane. But when a plane's coming into land, it has these 2 strips of lights, and they say, go to these 2 strips of light, do this, do that. So the method of participation is to break it down into the simplest of steps. So currently in our faculty, we're having to do a teaching sprint. And one of the things we're doing is we're starting and ending each lesson with a specific set of instructions to get going. So, for example, to end the lesson, so all of my lessons now end, and instead of just going, right, time to pack away, as soon as I say that, that's it, they're gone, I've lost them. So instead, I'll say, pens down, wait for that to be done. Then I'll say, in a moment, I'm going to get you to pack away. Before you do, I want you to do the following 3 things. Then I set out the 3 things, make sure that, I've articulated them as clearly as I can. Then, and this is where I always used to make the mistake, is about checking for understanding and saying, right, Jack, what's the first step I want you to do? Francis, what's the second step I want you to do? And just trying to reinforce it. It can take ages, but it's worth persevering with getting that skill, because there's nothing more frustrating than you giving them instructions and not doing it. So again, look inwards, break yourself down. What are the core instructions? What is the minimum I want them to do? Give them those instructions, check for understanding, and then sort of say, off you go and do that. Might not work, but you've got to keep getting into it. And comes back to we've said all night on this channel, it's been routines and it's been relationships. And once you build up that relationship and once you build up your routines, I think it should start to become a bit easier.
Gillian, a listener has actually messaged in, and they've said that they disagree that they think that passive pupils are the teacher's fault, or that passive pupils, it would come down to, the planning and engagement. I wondered whether you wanted to respond to that person who's texting to TTR.
I don't think I was meaning that it was the teacher's fault. I think you do get classes that are passive, but I think that's a sign for you to do something about it. They're your class, they're your responsibility. And some teachers are quite happy to have passive classes, but I'm just thinking if they're bored, then you must be bored as well. So make it more active, make it more engaging, get everybody
I don't
moving.
know, though. I sort of understand where that person's coming from.
Yeah, I can understand where they're coming from as well.
Only in the
but,
sense that
yeah.
I've had, in my career, I can think back now to a specific few classes I had in a specific school. This is going back a number of years, where I was literally sweating. It was like blood, sweat, and tears every single. Like I was full on planning. I was full on.
Then
like,
you can try too hard sometimes as well.
I was pulling out all the stops. I was doing lots of different things. I was mixing it up. I was, I had the subject knowledge by that point in my career. So I was doing it, but it was like, it just felt like getting blood out of a stone, and that doesn't mean that you wouldn't again turn around and say, yes, I need to look at myself, I need to look at my planning, but I can sort of understand the point that person is making.
No, I can understand the point they're making as well, but I think my first port of call would be looking at my planning and seeing that if changing it up works, first of all. If it didn't work, then you would revert back to your routines, building those relationships. Relationships are still key, and I think if you don't have those relationships with them, they are going to be passive with you, and if you're passive with them, then there's a part of the kind of chance in their luck. If you're not challenging them, I don't mean challenging them in a confrontational way, I mean challenging them academically, or getting them thinking and problem solving in a lesson about things, then they will be passive, because they're like, well, I don't need to do any work, because I can be passive in here, and it's about getting them thinking, getting them problem solving, and getting the critical thinking going and things like that with them in class. And it's not easy, and it is hard, and there are some classes where if that wasn't to work, then you can say, well, I've tried X, Y, and Z. They're still not engaging, they're still being passive, and then you go to the point where it depends on the year group of the class, but say it's an exam class, for example, and they've not passed their prelims, or they're not passing check-in points and things like that. Well, you've got the evidence to say, well, I as a teacher have tried X, Y, and Z to get these pupils engaged. They're still not engaging, and then you turn it back round on the pupil at that point and say, you're still not engaging, you're still not completing a reasonable amount of work. Here's your results to show this. What are you now going to do about it? Because I've done everything I can do as a teacher.
Because I was going to say, there must be times when you've done what you've said that you've done there, and it hasn't.
Absolutely.
There must be, surely.
100%.
Yeah. Anyway, we can spend ages on this. It's a good topic. I want to move on to this one, which is quite an important one, actually. I can't remember who went first last time, but anyway, I'll start with Derek, for the simple fact that Derek has been on the least amount of time. So Derek, the next one is, students are, despite reminders and other things, they're continuing to be rude to you and each other in lessons. Now, when I say students, more than one, let's say, students are continuing to be rude to you and each other in lessons. So what would if you're sitting there now and you are that teacher, what's your go-to right now?
Great question. I think my first go-to would be to think about where the students are in the class. If they're together as a wee group, then instantly that would be separated out to the four corners of the classroom. I often have, when I found that students being rude in the past, it has been 2 or 3 together sitting there. That's would be my first go-to. But I don't tolerate rudeness to myself. I don't tolerate rudeness to each other. The first thing would be a very swift rule reminder that is not how we speak to each other in the classroom. That is not how I expect to be spoken to as an adult. I would not speak to them in that manner. And I would probably spend more time bigging up the fact that they're being disrespectful to each other.
Yeah,
because
like I'm disappointed, I'm upset,
yeah,
all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, because they're with me for 50 minutes, and because I'm big enough and I'm old enough, and it's water off a duck's back to me. I'm not affected by what they're doing, but I would probably at some point, probably in a quiet conversation, because I think we need to try and be as least invasive as possible. Often they want an audience, so I'll have a quiet conversation with them and I'll say, look, you're not affecting me. It sounds really harsh, but I've said it to students. I don't care what you think about me. I don't go home after school thinking, oh my goodness, my S1s are really mean to me. I don't think about them once I leave school, and I tell them that. But the friends and the people in their class that they're upsetting and that they're being rude to, it is affecting them, and they've got to spend all day with them, and it's not fair. But I'm not, again, thinking back to when I started, I used to be worried about escalating things out of my classroom because I thought that senior management would therefore judge me. If I refer something to a deputy head, it is. And I think we've talked all night about building up relationships, but we need to have a good relationships with senior management. And this is sort of hard for me on one side because I'm a union rep and a local association secretary, and I've seen the very worst of senior management. But on a personal and professional level, I have to have good relationships, and I have to trust that if there's an issue in my class, it can be escalated to them. And I think I was lucky at the last time we had a union conference, Tom Bennett came to speak. And he said some great stuff, and he said that one of the things that struck me was that at some point we have to realize that we're not being judged on everything, and we need to just accept every teacher has a bad lesson. Any teacher that tells you they never have bad lessons is either barely teaching or is just telling you a lie. And having bad lessons and having pupils being disruptive and having pupils being rude does not make you a bad teacher.
No.
And you should not feel that you are being judged by senior leadership. So going back to the question, I would separate them in the first instance. I would speak to them about the consequences of their actions, not necessarily, these are the consequences, but more the impact that they'll have on each other and on their friends and how they'll become unpopular and so on. But then absolutely not be afraid to escalate it and follow the procedures. Speak to my principal teacher, speak to the deputy head who's in charge of that particular year, speak to that student's guidance teacher.
It's also getting out of that pattern of it's worrying about what other people think as well. It's getting out of that thing of what if they think I'm not a very good teacher? And it's like, I don't care anymore. It's like, I'm going to do whatever the best thing is for the students in this class. So that's what I'm focused on. So if people don't think I'm a good teacher, if people think because I'm doing X, Y, Z, I'm not good enough, or I'm not doing this, or I'm not doing that, that's up to them. You can't control what other people think of you. Absolutely. You can't control that. The only thing you can control is the steps you're taking. And it's like, I'm just going to take the steps that I know as a professional are the best steps to take. And what other people think about that, it's almost like, okay, that's what you think. I can't control that. Crack on.
Yep, absolutely. And then again, it's about not taking it personally.
Yeah.
It's very, very, very unlikely
to do. I mean, we shouldn't sort of say it as if, oh, don't take it personally. I mean, if somebody is saying, if it's not even about necessarily okay, let's think of slyness. Slyness for me can be more difficult to not take personally if a student isn't saying F off to you, but is actually doing something that feels like it's more like pre-planned, or more like whatever, but it's still not personal. It just hurts more, right? Do you know what I mean? It's like you just got to depersonalize it and just be like, that's part of the. I mean, the game's the wrong word, but it's like it's not personal to you as the as the teacher, the adult. It's like, yeah. I mean, maybe very occasionally it can be because they literally hate your guts. But 9 times out of 10, it's not. Okay, well, I think, does anyone else want to chip in on that? The whole, like,
a lot of what we're saying is very easy to say. It's not that easy to do.
Correct. We are human beings, and human beings.
You've got to be very confident in your own self-worth, and that's a very difficult thing in some teaching environments. So Absolutely. We need to be very careful not to sound too preachy.
I'm going to be open and honest.
I don't mean that in a horrible way. Everything there.
No, I completely agree. That's basically what I was saying.
Yeah.
It's like we're all human beings. There's nothing wrong with being flawed. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be liked. There's nothing wrong with wanting to do well. There's nothing wrong with wanting to feel like you're making a difference and you're doing all the right things. But ultimately, we're human beings. So we're never going to reach those levels.
You don't go into teaching to make friends with year 8s and year 9s, to be honest. But if they like you, it makes your job a lot easier. So but whether they like you is something you can't often control. So do your best is what I would say. And like I've been teaching a long time. Derek's been teaching a long time. You know, we've all been Gillian's been teaching a long time. It's very easy for us to sit here when people are quite, was it Mikey earlier on who said he's not been in the game as long as me? I'm not saying I'm anywhere near, but I'm far from perfect, as all my colleagues will tell you. All right. But you can't teach experience, and it's one of those things. Experience is so valuable, but you can give advice, but until people experience stuff themselves, it's very difficult to understand what that advice actually means sometimes.
Yeah. If I can just jump in for a second, Tom, I want to be open and honest here. Now, I've said a lot of these things, and a lot of this stuff about not caring and stepping out of the school and not particularly thinking about it. It was 3 years ago now, right at the start, just a month before the first COVID lockdown. I had a breakdown in school. I had a toxic relationship with my senior leadership. I had a toxic relationship with my principal teacher. He was in my classroom 7, 8, 9 times a day, pretending he wanted stuff, but he was secretly watching me. And I ended up off school for 5 months.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, mate.
And anxiety. And what got me through that, I managed to get some good therapy. I got some good support from family, friends, and the union. And it's only since then, I came back on a phased return. And for the first few weeks, I had Thursdays off. And I came back in the first week. I did the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I had the Thursday off. And on the Friday, when I came back in, one of the deputy heads said to me, "So how are you doing, Derek?" I said, "Do you know what? In my 20 years of teaching, yesterday, that first Thursday off, was the first day I had ever had off as a teacher where I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel guilty. I wasn't letting the school down. I wasn't letting the kids down. I wasn't letting my department down. And it took, a breakdown pretty much for me to realize that, to think it's not personal. It's not about that. I'm important. I can deal with this, and I'm not necessarily being judged because I found out who my friends were. I found out where the support was. I got a better relationship with the head teacher and so on. I put things in place. You can't teach experience. And I've had for years, I've had, beginning teachers or early career teachers that they come in, and I've had with probationers we have up here, and they come in, they watch me teach and they say, "Oh, I'm going to go and do that in my classroom." I say, "No, you can't do that in your classroom. You don't have that. You can't teach that experience." And I really hope I haven't come across as preachy.
You haven't. I'm just saying we've got to.
No. I didn't say. I didn't think it. Sorry. I didn't feel it as a personal thing because I want to. It is teaching is a hard job and it takes a lot out of you. And it's hard not to feel it personal. It is, and it took a long time for me to get to that point. But thankfully, things like this coming up onto here and having a chance to chat and to listen to some of these simple simple steps and simple things that we can do and listen to great teachers with great experience is helpful even for me. You know, after
Yeah,
sorry,
sometimes it is about, again, as a more experienced teacher, it's about doing the things that you would have liked a more experienced teacher to have done, to have helped you when you were struggling. So, for example, for me, my PGC was just like hardcore difficult. Like my PGC, I was in two of the toughest schools in Wales, like no exaggeration, and it was super tough. What I liked at that time was teachers who were really experienced, whether they were acting or not, I don't know, but saying things like, just talking about their own weaknesses and being like, I've just had this lesson, this happened, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, or oh, what am I doing, or oh, what should I have done? I should have done it. When I'm seeing that modeled, I'm going, well, I'm feeling a little bit better here. I'm feeling a little bit stronger. I'm feeling a little bit more confident. Now, those experienced teachers, that could have been an act. That could have been like, I'm solid, but I'm doing this for Tom because I want to make him feel better, and I want to make him feel more relaxed. I want to make him feel more embedded. So I think, and that may be just complete rubbish what I've just said, but the point I'm trying to make is like, experienced teachers can play that role. And it doesn't have to be that as an experienced teacher, that role has to be one of, I am absolutely strong and on top of everything, and I'm literally just, I'm running this. It doesn't have to be like that. It can be like that in some circumstances, of course, and you know, showing that side is of course important, but the other part, showing vulnerability, showing approachability, showing fallibility, showing all those things can be really, really impactful and helpful to not even new teachers, just teachers new to a school, right? Who are new to a school. Could be an experienced teacher who's been teaching for 10 years. They go into a school where it's a very different place than what they know, and they need to see people who are showing their vulnerable sides. And you know what? In some school environments, that is incredibly tough to do because you're literally being monitored to your high heels. So if you show vulnerability, you might be worried it'll be picked up on and you'll be marked down for it or whatever, right? But I'd like to think that once you hit certain experience levels, you can sort of go, I'm going to rise above that. And I'm actually going to be vulnerable, and I'm going to be real, and I'm going to show the whole genuine package of what I am as a professional. But it is still difficult for anybody to do that. But I don't think we do it enough within the profession. I don't think we do it enough for valid reasons, because people don't want to lose credibility within their schools. That can be pressure cookers. But that's sometimes what I think we need to try and do. Anyway, God, we could talk. Wow, this has got deep, which is good. Jay, you've got 2 minutes, mate. You've called in. I want to hear what you've got to add.
I'm the student which was mentioned in the radio before. I was the kid who shouted answers, annoying to you teachers. The strategy my teacher used which was my sociology teacher, I often shout out answers because I know them, and it does discourage my classmates from talking. And I do feel guilty about that. What my teacher do to me is he keep me down after lesson for about 10-13 seconds. Say, Jay, you're talking too much in lesson. You're answering. You're shouting out your answers, and now the teacher still do hands up because we are quite a small class. But I tend to know, as he keep repeating and reminding me that, I tend to try to control myself when I'm trying to answer, and answer when they're trying to actually hand out or even encourage my classmates to answer the questions I think is to a level easier for me, and answer the hard ones. So I think by giving students more respects or valuing their input, like my input into lesson and their input into lesson, can help those students who are very eager to learn and find the balance between they're eager to answer and to engage with the need of the rest of the class to engage. Also, I think on the more pettier sort of misbehavior, like shouting out a lesson, like getting on with their phones or not pay attention, I think more we need is sort of a more tolerant and respectful approach that teachers should take on them. More tolerant, I mean, when I was in year 11, year 10, I seen a lot of lessons seriously disrupted. Half the lessons being spent on a hoodie or a phone because the student don't like to hand out their phone. Student don't like to hand out the hoodies to the teacher. No one likes to hand out their stuff to the teachers. I think it's more important. I always tell my teachers to do that. Some of them take my advice. Just get on with the lesson, and if the student don't hand out their phones, if the student don't take off their hoodies, talk to them after lesson. I want to learn. I'm not seriously disrupted because the person sitting next to me or 2 rows behind me have a hoodie on him. So I'd rather say it's important for teachers to realize or to understand what students feel, make them feel respected and valued in lesson, and to have a bit more tolerant and know when and where to, at which level to intercept misbehavior, or what can be done actually after lesson instead of during lesson in front of the whole class. If a teacher talks to me in person, as if I sometimes misbehave, I'm not a perfect student. But when a teacher, what I feel is when a teacher talks to me in lesson in front of everyone, I tend to be a bit more deviant, or let's say I'll be a bit more harder to deal with. But if the teacher talks to me nicely after lesson and wish to talk to me that, Jay, you're not doing very well there, then I'll try to accept and understand maybe what the teacher is thinking about, or maybe I am disrupting the classes, even if I thought I'm doing the right thing, or even if I thought that's not a big deal. I have to understand the teacher's just doing his job. That sometimes I think, instead of disciplining in lesson, sometimes necessary, but sometimes not really, it's perhaps worth thinking about when you see a disruption, or when you see some less disruptive that's behavior that's breaching the policy. Hoodie, for example, you can think about whether you can actually talk to the person in private. They'll be more open to you in private. That's just what I think as a student myself.
I mean, I think Jay, we sort of touched on this earlier in terms of, I think we said, that we need to, I think those sort of conversations that happen outside lessons or at the end of lessons or between lessons are important. I also think, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth here, but I think we all sort of agree that we need to be respectful. And, everyone, there needs to be mutual respect, in conversations with students and vice versa, like there has to be mutual respect. So yeah, thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
Really interesting insight. So thank you very much. We've got our last one now, our last little scenario. So I'm going to read it out, and then we'll get stuck into it just for the final few minutes. We'll hopefully whiz through this one. So you feel like it's, in inverted commas, just you who has an issue with some classes. You've more or less been told this by a member of SLT and other colleagues. What do you do? How do you audit your own classroom management to know if you're on the right track? And how, in general, how do you respond to this? How do you deal with it for your own well-being? Gillian, I'll come to you first on this.
I think if you've got SLT and colleagues that are saying it's just you, you need new SLT and new colleagues. To be quite honest, it's never just you.
Correct, Gillian. And absolutely correct.
It's that thing where it's, oh, well, they behave for me. Oh, well, good for you. They're not behaving for me. And I've always found if I'm having issues with classes, speaking to my colleagues has got me through it, because usually I find out it's not just me. And say other teachers are having the same issues, or maybe or another thing that we sometimes do is we maybe observe the pupil in other classes if we've got time. So like shadow the pupil for a day, and see how they are in other class, or shadow a class for a day and see how they are in other subjects, so that we can get ideas and strategies for our own classes, to again go back to building those relationships and applying certain strategies to make it easier with those classes. But it's never just you. And I mean, I have had management that have been like that, and I've moved on, to be quite honest.
Derek, anything on this one? Andy, anything on this one?
Sorry, yeah, sorry, I was had pressed the wrong button. Do you know? I can't say anything other than what Gillian said. It is never just you. You know, and I can attest to this from a union point of view, from the meetings I've sat in, where senior leaders have said this, and we would never say that to a student. We would never say to a student, "This class is doing fantastic. You're the only one who's failing." You know, and for a manager to say that to a member of staff is just wrong. It's not right. Now, of course, there are teachers who have issues with certain classes. I remember years ago hearing a quote. You know, someone said that what I like to do is wait until there's someone screaming at you to get something done, and then there's someone there to help you do it. If someone comes to you and says you've got these particular issues, then we just need to say, okay, what's your solution? If you're saying I've got a problem and I can't deal with it, what's your solution? Don't offer me problems, offer me solutions, if that makes sense. But it's, you know, I have had senior leaders say it to I've had it said to me, I've had it said to friends and colleagues. And as Gillian again, she said, speak to your colleagues, because you'll find that it's almost never, well, it invariably isn't you. And these students are like that for others as well. But you know, it's about,
and it can also be that other people are sort of lying to themselves and others by saying everything's hunky dory. They're just trying to keep the batten down on it. They're just trying to keep the outward pretense that everything's absolutely fine for their own reasons. You know, I'm not blaming those teachers for doing that, or those leaders for doing that, but they want to contain everything for their own sort of preservation, whether that be preservation of the school in the media, or on a micro level, preservation of their own credibility, or how they feel they're perceived within that environment. And that can be part of a sort of toxic culture. Presentism.
I think it's something like, sometimes what it is that you may be the only teacher that's following the strategies and actually escalating it out of the classroom. Because you're the only one that's raising this issue, senior leadership will only see you, because, as I said earlier, sometimes staff, they don't want to be judged. So they'll keep things within their classroom. They won't send out, they won't ask for help.
And therefore, you as that teacher would never find out about that.
No.
Because they didn't log it on the system, or they didn't give the warning out, or they didn't challenge the behaviour, because they thought, I'm going to keep this under wraps a little bit here, and I'm just going to tactically ignore everything and get through each day. And then I'm going to say in meetings or in the staff room that I'm doing fantastically well, right? Because it's just easier to do that, right? I think that can genuinely happen in some environments. I think you've raised some really good points. Andy, you get the final word on this one.
Oh dear, sorry. Right. Well, I played a lot of team sport in my times when I could move and things like that, and wasn't quite so fat. But I think actually teaching can take a lot from team sports. Like you're only, as a team, you're only as strong as your weakest individual. Okay. And so people going around saying, oh, well, they behave for me, is not helpful to anyone. It's not helpful to you. It's not helpful to the person you've just told that to. So don't bother doing it. You're a team. And actually, I run my tutor group as a team, and we don't let ourselves down. And that's you know what I mean? So if one of us does something silly, we've let the team down. And actually, the staff can do that. Staff bodies can do that. Classes can do that. And I think teamwork is massively underrated. Within it's, you know, the I'm all right, Jack. Actually, are very, very, very damaging.
I mean, we have to also remember that many would say that the system is set up in such a way that competition is promoted between teachers, between schools, between departments, whatever. You know, everyone. It's very much set up where to make you think that you are in competition with everybody else.
Agreed, but you don't have to adhere to that particularly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And actually, it's not that brave not to adhere to it, in my view, because you're supposed to be all pulling in the same direction. If you're all pulling in your own direction, you move nowhere. If you're all pulling in the same direction, you actually get somewhere. And that's the sort of mentality that I like to work with and for, because actually I want to get better each day, and the whole school wants to get better each day. The kids all want to get better each day, and that's the way we're going to do it.
I just want to say a massive thanks, Andy, Derek, and Gillian. It's been an absolute pleasure. Everybody else who's called in, listened in, tweeted in, posted in, whatever you want to call it now. It's been absolutely fantastic. Huge thanks to John Catt for supporting this show and our other shows at the moment. If you're interested in finding out more, then visit johncattbookshop.com and use the code JCTTR2324 to get 20% off anything in their bookshop. Massive thanks, John Catt, for supporting us tonight in what we're doing. I've really enjoyed the conversation. It's been, it's got through a lot. Maybe we need a part 2 on this at some point, because it feels like we could go on for like days and still not go through everything that happens or goes on, bring out all the different views and opinions on how things could work. So it's been great, and hopefully helpful for you guys out there. This will be published at some point as a podcast. I'm not sure when exactly, but it'll be available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the usual ones. I'll look out for it. Just follow Teachers Talk Radio on wherever you get your podcasts, and it will pop up at some point on there, alongside all our other amazing shows, which continue to grace the airwaves. It's not just this one; we have shows every single day. We'll be back again soon on Teachers Talk Radio. Take care. Good night.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.